Hi, I'm Debbie and I'm a volunteer with BrumYODO. And BrumYODO helps people of all ages, children and adults, to have conversations about death and dying, because we can often find it to be a subject that's really hard to talk about. So BrumYODO are looking at all sorts of different ways to help us have that conversation that death is a natural part of life. It's been a really difficult time in Birmingham and in fact the world over, and a very sad time. Many people have been ill because of COVID and many people have died. When someone dies, it can be really sad for those people who knew the person well, and it's been even harder during COVID because we haven't been able to see each other or support each other in person. We haven't been able to visit people in hospital or in care homes, and some people haven't been able to go to funerals. BrumYODO has been working with the theatre Birmingham Hippodrome to find ways in which we can talk about how we're feeling and remember all those who have died. And in May, we're going to be bringing a very special artwork to Birmingham called In Memoriam. In Memoriam has been created by the artist Luke Jerram. It's going to be in Aston Park in Birmingham between the 8th and the 16th of May. It's an installation that is made up of 120 flags, helping us to remember all those who have died and also to say thank you to all those in the NHS and all those other workers who've played such an important part in helping us through this difficult period.
My name is Luke Jerram and I'm the artist behind In Memoriam. It is an installation of about 40 metres across. It consists of 120 flags, all made of NHS bedsheets, and they create this large array, an installation for people to explore and contemplate. During the pandemic, we've needed these horizons, especially during lockdown, these empty spaces. We feel safe, comforted. There's a sense of the future in front of us. I suppose this artwork provides that opportunity to contemplate.
We've been thinking about how local people can get engaged in the In Memoriam artwork, and we're encouraging everybody, children and adults, to think about making their own In Memoriam flag. And it can be made of anything that you've got at home. It can be made of fabric, it can be made of paper, and it's about something that's personal to you. You might want to make a flag that's thinking about someone who's died and be thinking about what was special about them, what memories have you got, how can you make that flag personal for you and that person. Or you might decide that you want the flag to show how you're feeling at the moment or what really stands out from the past year for you. And of course you might want to make the flag to say thank you, and that might be to the NHS, might also be to your teachers or anybody else who you think has done a really important job during this difficult period in the past year. What we'd like to see is hundreds of flags right across Birmingham telling lots of different stories. And have a think about where you'd like to put your flag. Are you going to put it indoors, perhaps up in a window, or would you like to put it outdoors? In a garden or perhaps a window box. And if it is going outdoors, it's just thinking about what materials might you make it of. So thinking about, is it weatherproof? The artist Luke Jerram will now tell you a little bit more about In Memoriam, and then Margaret will be showing you different ways to make a flag. So as you're watching Luke and Margaret, have a think about your flag. Who would you be making your flag for? So as you make your flag, are you wanting to thank or remember?
Hello everybody, welcome to our flag making session. It's lovely that you've joined us today, and we're going to make a long rectangle flag in the style of the In Memoriam flags. And we're going to make our flags to remember people and also to celebrate and to perhaps look at some of the things that have affected us over the last year or so. So we're going to have a look at what we're going to use. I've got lots of things on my table. So I've got some wax crayons and I've got some paints. Now, young people, if you're doing this at home, and you want to put your flag outside, you will need something like an acrylic paint, and perhaps you would need somebody else to help you with painting that. I've got some thread, some coloured thread. I've got a needle in my little sewing kit. I've got biro. I've got a ruler, but anything with a straight edge will also do, fine. I've got a scissors, and I've got some glue. And again, perhaps young people, you might need a little bit of assistance when you're using glue, if you decide to use glue. Okay, now, I'm using things that I've found around the house that I've got myself for my flag. And I'm going to make a fabric flag. So we're going to make a long rectangle flag. So it's going to be shorter on the top and longer on the sides. And we're going to have a flag pole. So I've looked around my house and seen what I've got that I can use. So I've got a fabric tote bag. And I know mine looks very new, but actually I've had it for quite a while. Okay, so I'm going to maybe use that. I've found a piece of fabric, again, in my recycle bag that I have lots of rags and bits and pieces. And this was, I think it's a piece from an old sheet. And I found a few scraps of colour fabric. I quite like the red in contrast with the white. I found an old serviette, and you can see it's even stained. But I thought that's another piece of fabric that can be used. And I found an old hanky. So if you're making a very small flag, you could use something like this. Okay, so let's make our flag. So I've got my tote bag, and the size of my flag is going to be 380 millimetres across. So I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to measure that across. And it's going to be 600 millimetres on the long side. So I've looked at my bag and I thought, okay, what I can do is I will cut my bag open. So cut along the two long sides. So what we're doing is opening up the bag, and that will give us a long piece of fabric. So it's already going to be a long rectangle piece of fabric. Right. So I'm going to open that up. So it gives me a long piece of fabric. Okay. And I'm going to cut off the handles. Just snip them off. And the same on the other side. So we don't need those. So with my ruler, I'm going to mark my 600 millimetres, I beg your pardon. If we have 600 metres, it would go all the way around the country probably. So I'm going to measure from the top. I'm going to just cut off the little edge that's on the top of the bag. I'm going to cut that off as well. So just take your time and do it nice and neatly. So I'm going to measure my 600 millimetres, not 600 metres, all the way down my bag. And as it happens, this bag that I've chosen is almost 380 millimetres across. Okay, so I would mark that all the way along, and I would draw a line using my straight edge all the way across. Okay, and I'm going to cut off the extra piece that I've got here. Now, if you happen to be using two smaller pieces of fabric, you could join them together in the middle. But this makes a nice long rectangle. Okay. So now I'm going to neaten off the edges. I've turned it to the back. And I'm just going to neaten off the edges. So you'll see where it was joined together. It's a little bit of excess. So I'm just going to cut that off. So take your time and cut it down nicely, neatly. Use your scissors. Always use your scissor cutting away from you, never toward you. Let's cut all along the edge. And this will be mostly just on one side. There we are, cutting it all away. Nice and straight, nice straight edge. Okay. Right, so we've got a nice rectangle of fabric. Now, you can, of course, iron or smooth it out nice and neatly so it's nice and flat. If we're putting our flag outside and it's blowing in the wind, it might fray at the edges. So we get little bits of thread and it becomes a bit frayed at the edges. So what we can do, we can turn in 20 millimeters on the short sides. Now, because it's nice cotton fabric, you can press it down, measure your 20 millimeters, again, mark it and press it down nice and neatly. And the same on the other side, the other short side. We're working on 3 sides at the moment. And the same on the long side. So we're just pressing it down. We've measured it to 20 centimeters from the edge, turned it over, and it's a little turnover. And if you press down along, you get a nice neat edge. So I've got my 3 sides turned in. Okay. So I'm now going to sew my 3 sides. So I've got my examples. So I've prepared some examples. So I've got my 3 sides ready to sew down. And I've just put a pin in this one to show you. Okay. Now, please be careful when you're using a needle and thread. It's quite sharp. So just take your time and sew. Now, because I'm working on a white piece of fabric, I'm going to use quite a bright coloured thread so that you're able to see what I'm doing. I'm also going to use quite a long sewing stitch, again, so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm putting a knot in the very end of my thread. So this will help to anchor the thread when I start my first stitch. So I've got my thread in my needle. So I'm going to make a stitch which is approximately 1 centimetre. And then I'm going to go back over that twice, and that will keep my thread from coming loose, and it's called a back stitch because you go back over it. And then I'm going to do a neat row of stitching all along my folds on the short sides and the longer side, so on 3 sides of my fabric. So I'm going in and out and doing neat stitching. Now I'm making them quite large so you can see what I'm doing, but do small neat stitches all the way along. Now if you need help from somebody else to do this, please do ask them to help you. But take your time and do it nice and neatly all the way along. Okay? So I've got my example of one that I've finished right to the end. So as you can see, I've sewn all the way around with my pink thread on the back of the fabric. Okay, so I'm ready now to make a pocket on the long side that we haven't sewn so far. And this pocket is going to be the pocket where we put our flagpole. Okay, so this is a little bit wider. So I've measured 30 millimeters in from the edge and folded over, and again folded it down nice and neatly so it's a nice straight edge. Again, take your time, measure along, mark, measure and fold. Now I'm going to use a different colour thread here so that you can see that this is a different line of sewing, and I'm going to sew. Facing me at the moment is the bottom of my flag. So I'm going to start about, I would say 5 millimeters from the actual raw edge of my turnover. And I'm again going to do a back stitch, which is going over your little stitch, maybe 2 or 3 times. It just helps to keep the thread from coming loose. And if we're flying our flags outside on a nice windy day, we don't want them to come apart. Okay, so I'm now going to sew all the way along on my pocket, again taking my nice even stitches all the way along, and you can see that I'm sewing about, I would say, just under 20 centimetres from the outer edge, because we're making an actual pocket. So you're going to sew all the way along, again right to the top, right to the top. Take your time and do nice even stitches. And what you end up with is, turn it toward me. So now I've ended up with, I've completed my sewing all the way along, all the way up the long side, and then, this is very, very important, on the very top part of the pocket, you sew right back towards the edge, because remember, we're going to put our flagpole into our flag, and we don't want it to come out at the other end. Okay, so, and finish off with a back stitch. So that's actually our basic flag made. So that's the back, and then if we turn it over, that's the front. This is the top, and this is the bottom part where we're going to put our flagpole. Now, for our flagpole, I've chosen to use a piece of bamboo, just something you might have in the garden, or again a piece of dowel, or a piece of like piping might do as well. And they're really good because they're quite rigid, but they're also quite lightweight. Okay, so that's going to be my flagpole. So I've got my flag. So now is my opportunity to do a little bit of decorating on my flag. And you can use lots and lots and lots of things to decorate our flags. So we might use a piece of fabric, and I'm using a contrasting piece, and my piece is red. So this is a scrap from my sewing box, piece of fabric that I had around the house. I quite like the colour, and I quite like the texture on it. So I'm going to take my biro, and I'm going to use a nice heart shape. And I'm going to draw a heart shape on my fabric with the biro, on the back of the fabric. And biros are absolutely excellent for drawing on fabric. And I'm then going to just draw it on the back, and I'm going to cut that out. Now, if you're not very confident in drawing a shape, you can of course draw a shape onto paper and then cut around it. But actually, things that are really good for copying shapes are things like cookie cutters that actually have really, really nice shapes. So you might decide to use a star or lots of different things. It's really up to you to be as expressive and creative as you want. Again, adding things to your flag that perhaps have meaning to you. So I'm going to add my heart shape right in the middle of my flag. I'm just pinning it on, and then I would sew all the way around that as well to make sure it's well attached on to my flag. And I'm going to keep this flag really, really simple. So it's a very simple white flag with a red heart. And I'm just going to add my flagpole now. And my flag is ready for hoisting. So when you're putting it in, just wiggle it about a little bit to get it in. There we go. And there's our flag. Our In Memoriam style flag, rectangle flag. And we've kept to a very simple colour scheme of white and red. And I think it's quite effective. What about you? So have a go, make your own flags, and enjoy making them. we're going to make a rectangle flag using some paper that you might have lying around the house. Okay, I've chosen a very, very plain piece of paper, and it's a piece of paper you might have in the printer, or you might have in a sketchbook, or you might have in a notebook. And it is what we refer to as an A4 sheet of paper, which is 210 millimetres by 297 millimetres on the long side. And we're going to make a long rectangle flag. So what we're going to do, we're going to actually join two pieces of paper together across the short side. So I'm going to lay down my sheets of paper. Again, you can use things from your recycling box, which is a great way to recycle a piece of paper. So it might be something you've already printed on or something you've used. So I'm very simply sellotaping my two sheets of paper together. So now I've got a long rectangle. Now, I could decide just to leave my flag this size, but I'm really keen to make it my flag a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join two more sheets of paper together. And again, I could be using lots of different paper that I have around the house, or even nice paper from packaging. I've got my sellotape to the ready. Just overlap my sheets of paper a little bit in the centre and stick them down together. So now I've got two rectangles, two long rectangles, and I'm now going to join those together. And I'm slightly overlapping them again in the middle, and I'm going to sellotape all the way down. So what I end up with is almost looking like a window with my 4 panes of glass, but it's 4 sheets of paper attached together to make quite a big rectangle. So that would be the back, and this will be the front of my flag. Now I could use a stick, or I could use a bamboo as my flag pole, but I've decided I'm actually going to make a flag pole using some sheets of paper, just in case you don't have a stick and you think, oh dear, I'm not going to be able to make a flag because I haven't got all the right things. So again, this time I've taken 3 sheets of paper, and exactly as I made my flag, I'm going to join 2 together on the short sides first, and sellotape those down. Now you take your time doing this. And then I'm going to join the 3rd sheet of paper. Again, joining them on the 2 short sides. Just overlap them, one on top of the other a little bit, a few millimeters, and then I'm going to sellotape them down. So what I've ended up with is a very, very long rectangle of paper. Now at this stage, I will say, I'll give you a good tip, lay it on the lengthways facing from you. I'm just going to move this a little bit over here. And now I'm going to make almost a little fold on the very long edge. Not all the way flattened down, but I'm moving along the paper and just making a fold, but not flattening it all the way down. And do that. This will really help you if you do this part, because this is the beginning of it. And then I'm going to now, almost like I'm working with clay or plasticine, I'm going to roll. And just take your time and roll it all the way along. That's it. Take your time and roll it all the way along. There we go. Keep rolling. So the better you make your first fold, the easier it is to roll. And we're rolling all the way along. So I'm just rolling, rolling, rolling the paper. Now this is where it's good to have somebody to help you. I'm just going to use something to hold it down so it doesn't come apart. And I'm going to sellotape it with 2 pieces first, just to hold it down. And then I'll take a longer piece of sellotape and fold and sellotape all the way along the join. Okay, just all the way along the paper. You'll be so surprised how strong paper is when you actually fold it and roll it. Okay, so I've now got my long flagpole. I'll take my flag. And again, on the back, where I've got the sellotape, I'm going to place down my flagpole. And I'm going to sellotape, just fold over part of my flag onto my flagpole, and I'm going to sellotape all the way along. Okay. Again, you could use glue. And this is a very quick example of a flag that you could make. And then I'm going to sellotape along the back. And I tend to put a few little pieces first and then go back and use a longer piece. It's easier. So sellotaped it down, and then I'm going to use a longer piece to actually join it all together properly. Cut it off at the end. There we go. So we've got our paper flag. So we've got a long rectangle paper flag with our paper flagpole. Now again, turn your flag to the right side and you can decorate your flag. I'm going to use some wax crayons to decorate my flag. And I'm going to take my red wax crayon, and again I'm going to do my red heart shape, which the shepherd quite like, and I've been using quite a lot on the flags. And I'm going to draw a few heart shapes almost inside each other, just using my red crayon. And I'm now going to also add a word, so you can use words on your flags. So you can use words to decorate. I'm going to use the word hope. Okay. So that's my paper flag with a paper flagpole decorated. Again, take your time, use your pens, your markers, your paints to decorate your flag. And of course this will be an indoor flag, and our fabric flags are for outside.
So you've now heard from Luke about In Memoriam, and you've seen Margaret making some examples of flags. So hopefully you're now feeling inspired to make your own flag. You can decide to use the template that Margaret showed us to make your flag, or you can just make the flag in any way that works well for you. You can leave it blank, or you can decide to put designs on it and pictures. We can't wait to see all the flags that you will be making. So when you've finished your flag, we'd love you to take a picture of it, whether you've made it at home or at school, because we're going to be having a gallery on the BrumYODO website, and we're going to be putting lots of pictures of flags made right across the city. And if your family or school use social media, we'd love you to take some pictures and post them on different social media platforms, and use the hashtag LifeDeathBrum and In Memoriam. We know that many people won't be able to get to Aston Park to see the actual installation, but we hope this is a really exciting way that we can all get involved in Memoriam, and to remember those who've died, share stories, and thank all those who've been working so hard for us during the pandemic.